Hi, I'm Josh, and I'm so grateful you've chosen to spend some of your very valuable time with me as I talk about some board games today. I am recording this on the 24th of December, and one of my goals for 2024 is to get these videos out the month after the month that I'm talking about. So I've sort of got a little bit off track where I'm kind of releasing these monthly gameplay videos a couple of months after the month in which they were completed. So I'm gonna try to get that back on track in 2024. This is also the time of year where the mental health tends to take a little bit more of a nosedive than usual. And I go, why am I putting any effort into my physical appearance? And I shave off the mohawk and just start growing out the hair and beard and decide that I'm going to, for the second time in my life, grow out my hair long. The last time I did that was about when I was 18 or 19 years old, I think. So more than half a lifetime ago. And then, of course, I inevitably get to that awkward middle stage where I go, this is driving me crazy. I'm shaving the mohawk back in again. But yeah, ever since I ended up single again, I've always really struggled a lot this time of year. Typically, I have my kids with me here on Christmas Eve and Christmas morning. And then at around noon Christmas Day, I take them over to their mom's place, at which point I seem to traditionally have a bit of a mental breakdown. So I'm going to see if I can avoid doing that tomorrow by trying to plan a few just kind of little activities for myself here at home. We'll see how that ends up working out for me. But anyways, what I'm here to talk about now are the board games I played in November. And I did play 12 unique games in November, of which 4.5 were new to me. So I do have several new games to talk about for the month of November. So I'm looking forward to talking about those. Let's get to it. As usual, I'm going to go through these games in order of my lowest rated game to my highest rated game. The first two games on the list here were games that I had a chance to play on BoardGameArena with a nice lady who keeps inviting me to play games with her, which is a really great thing. It allows me to try out some new stuff, as well as a few old favorites, which I'll talk about for games played in December. But the first one on my list is a game called Botanic, which I think is a relatively newish game from the last couple of years. And it looks right up my alley because it is very simple, very tactical. It's a tile laying game, which is a big plus for me. It's a route connecting or route building game, I should say, which is also a big plus for me most of the time. However, for whatever reason, this game just didn't really work for me. I'm not sure if I was missing something, but it just seemed kind of boring. It didn't really seem like there was all that much interesting going on in the game. And another thing against it was I just find the art style in this game absolutely terrible, to the point where I didn't even like looking at the components, which of course art is an entirely subjective thing, but for whatever reason it just kind of turned me off even more from the game. I ended up losing this game 29 points to 17, so clearly I wasn't really catching on to the strategy very well. And although I ultimately rated the game 3.5 out of 10, I was grateful to have the opportunity to try it, because like I said, I thought this might be a game that I enjoyed. Turned out to not be the case. Next up was a game called Ancient Knowledge, which is a civilization-themed game that is based around cards and card play. Essentially, you are building these buildings on your timeline of your civilization, and when you build a building, it tends to come with a certain amount of knowledge, and then over time, your buildings are going to decay and eventually go into decline and drop off your civ timeline, and you really want to extract all the knowledge that you've gained from that building before it drops off, because the knowledge ends up coming back as negative points for the most part. There's some really cool stuff in terms of the card combos and the different things you can work together to get going in your civilization. So the card play reminded me to a certain extent of Jump Drive, which in itself is a kind of simplified version of Race for the Galaxy, I think. So it has these really interesting things going on with the card play. The theme was kind of fun. I'm always drawn to Civ games, although, you know, for the most part, it was a fairly abstract card game. This time it was my opponent's turn, learned to not really catch on to the initial strategies of the game, because I ended up winning the game 58 points to 1, so it kind of worked out in my favor this time. I rated the game 6 out of 10. It was fun to play on BoardGameArena. Like I said, I am drawn to Civ-themed games, but I tend to enjoy the ones like Clash of Cultures, where you got this big map to explore and these technologies to build up and all this really fun stuff going on. So I don't necessarily enjoy quite as much the abstract versions of the Civ games. And although it was fun to try this one, I wouldn't necessarily seek it out as something to purchase for myself. Next, I got back to, I think it was my newest acquisition, called My Farm Shop. This is the dice rolling game that is kind of inspired by the game Machikoro. I talked about it, I think, in the games that I played in the month of October. This time around, I played another 2-player game with Paul using all 3 mini expansions that are included with the game. And although I wasn't sure if adding the kind of larger module that we haven't played yet to the game would improve it, or just add more complications that were maybe not necessary to increase the fun of the game, I did find that it worked out really well and enjoyed playing with all 3 of the modules. I managed to squeak out a very narrow victory by only about 2 points this time. I'm still undefeated in My Farm Shop. But the one thing I wanted to highlight was somebody else on BoardGameGeek.com pointed out this issue of art plagiarism in the game. So apparently the artist for this game is named Christian Fiore, but this person noticed a very, very striking similarity between the character on the box and, as this person said, the woman on the box appears to be an almost direct copy of a character named Catherine from a mobile game called Homescapes. And when you really stop to examine all the little details of both drawings, you do realize this is a almost direct copy of somebody else's art. And in a day and age where AI is gradually taking over art spaces and kind of pushing artists out of business, it's that much more disturbing, I think, to see an artist copying another artist's work. So based on what I'm seeing here, that just seems entirely unacceptable from my point of view. But in terms of rating the gameplay itself, I had previously mentioned, I think, that between myself, my 2 sons, and Paul, we cover quite a range of ratings. I rate the game 6.5 out of 10, Paul rates it 7 out of 10, Wyatt 7.5 out of 10, and my oldest boy Evan rates it 8 out of 10. So it hasn't been a huge success. I can see this one ending up on my for sale pile, to be honest with you. Paul and I next got back to another 2-player game of Champions of Midgard with the Valhalla expansion. I won this time by a fair margin with my Sword Maiden leader, who really likes the Sword Warriors, versus Paul's Favor of the Gods leader, who likes to accumulate favors of the gods, obviously. Here's a game that really does its Viking theme well. It's an interesting mix of worker placement, these kind of Euro-style mechanisms, alongside the more Ameritrash dice chucking and battling it out, seeing what happens, seeing if luck turns in your favor or not. The good thing is, with the Valhalla expansion, like I've mentioned previously, it really helps to mitigate the luck of the dice in terms of, even if your warriors die in battle, they can be put towards useful things in Valhalla. So I rate the game 7.5 out of 10. Paul rates it 8 out of 10. With my older son Evan, I got to break out the Great Heartland Hauling Company. This is a little pocket-sized pick-up and deliver game where players are truckers who are picking up farm goods and taking them to cities where they're in demand and selling them for money. It's a very, very simple, stripped-down version of the pick-up and deliver mechanism that combines with a bit of a ticket-to-ride style card play, where you can draw cards to add to your hand and collect certain sets and play them to do stuff on the board. It was the first time Evan has played it, and he seemed to catch onto it pretty well. I rate the game 7.5 out of 10. When I played this with Paul in the past, he had rated it 8 out of 10. Paul and I also got back to the cooperative game Pandemic: Fall of Rome, another game with a fun theme. This is one of the versions of Pandemic that I do enjoy playing still, even though I've played so much Pandemic over the years, and it is partly due to the theme and partly due to the way it incorporates that theme with some interesting mechanisms of these various tribes trying to descend on Rome and pillage Rome. This time around, we played on easy difficulty because I had erroneously thought that our last play of the game, we had played twice on easy mode and lost both times, but in looking back at my records, it turns out we had played on normal mode and lost those games. So accidentally going back to easy mode this time. We actually had a fairly easy win, and it's clear that we do need to try it on normal difficulty level again to see if we can manage to pull out a victory at its kind of base level of difficulty. It's a great pandemic version. I rate it 7.5 out of 10, and Paul rates it 8 out of 10. Before I go on to talk about a few more of the new to me games, let me just send out a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters, especially to my higher tier supporters, Charles M, Abe O, Saver Girl, Mojo Dam, Joanna N, and my highest tier supporter, Osmondus Perfect. Your help, especially during this Christmas season, really helps me to give my kids the kind of Christmas I'd like to give them without worrying too much about the financial situation, so I really am grateful for that. And I hope that you all in turn are enjoying your holiday seasons. So this next game is the one that I said is kind of half new to me, and this is a game called Clask 4 because I had previously played Clask, which is a two-player dexterity game utilizing a magnet-based token to kick a ball on top of a wooden platform to try to score goals with the ball. But what I ended up doing was, for my kids, I ended up giving them kind of an early Christmas present of the 4-player version of this game. So now, instead of the game being divided in half, where you're playing under the board with your magnetic token, now it's divided into quarters under a round game, and 4 people can play it at once, which is good in terms of the fact that typically my kids are playing with their friends, so they don't have to have people sitting out while only 2 players are playing. However, I've found that it's just not quite as good with the 4-player version because there's no easy way to play with only 2 or 3 players, because you're essentially having to try to ignore a portion of the board because your pieces under the board are blocked from going into other zones, and so you end up with kind of some dead zones on the board that are, if the ball gets into those areas, you know, you have to end up tilting the board or something to get it back into play, which makes it kind of awkward. So yeah, it does have that advantage of being able to play with 4 players, but the big disadvantage of, if you're not playing with exactly 4 players, it's a little bit more awkward. And so, you know, if I had a do-over there, I would just get the 2-player version, and if there were multiple friends, I play in more of a tournament or elimination style thing where 2 people could play at a time. I might end up trying to build some kind of walls to wall off sections that aren't being used to see if that allows the game to be played a little bit more easily without kind of awkward interruptions. I'm not sure if that'll end up working or not. I rate Clask 4 an 8 out of 10, which I think is the same rating I gave to Basic Clask, because essentially it is the same game, just a slightly different design to accommodate more players. Next up, I got on Steam to do some solo play against the AI with the game Hive. There is a pretty decent version of Hive on Steam that I've played before. I ended up with a tied game. I wasn't sure if it was possible to tie Hive, because basically if you move a piece into position that simultaneously surrounds both players' queens, apparently it does result in a tied game. I wasn't sure if that's what would happen when I made that move, but that is what happened. The AI on Steam is very good. I can only win consistently when I play on the easier levels of the AI. When I'm playing even just on normal, I think I've only ever won 1 game. So it's nice that there is that solid AI there to provide the challenge. I rate Hive 8 out of 10. The physical version I have is Hive Pocket, and it's a fun little game to take around if I'm going places where I know I might be able to play a game with one other person. The next game is the first and only 2023 release that I have played this year in 2023. This is a strictly 2-player cooperative game called Sky Team, and if you've been following any board gaming media over the past several months, I'm sure you'll have heard of this game because everyone is raving about it. This game has the very unique theme of 2 players cooperatively playing as a captain and first officer, or pilot and co-pilot, of an airliner that is coming into land, and they have to roll dice and utilize their dice to operate all the systems of the aircraft to bring it in for a safe landing. What an incredibly original theme. And as somebody who has always been an aviation geek, this is a theme that does appeal to me. I mean, ever since I was a kid, I've been fascinated with aircraft. I read all those biographies and autobiographies of First and Second World War pilots. I've been in aircraft of several different sizes, from gliders to big airliners. I've jumped out of aircraft a couple of times. And I've seen firsthand exactly what happens when you don't land an aircraft correctly. With my work as a paramedic, I have a video that I posted about 3 years ago called Josh Yaks about his craziest experience in 16 years of working as a paramedic, in which I talk about attending to the scene of an Air France aircraft that crashed at Pearson Airport during a thunderstorm. There's an airplane going by right now. So yeah, the theme definitely grabs me, and the way the game is made is done so simply. All you're doing is you're both secretly rolling 4 dice and then placing your 4 dice into various action spots to activate parts of the aircraft and trying to work together to determine how best that can be done. And it's very simple to learn, but it's also kind of challenging and interesting, and you can progress through a bunch of different levels of difficulty as new elements are added to the game. What I do wonder though is, if you add more elements of difficulty to it, does that mean you become more reliant on having to roll exact numbers? I don't know how much it adds to the strategy of the game versus necessitating better luck with your die rolls. Don't exactly know how that would play out unless I actually try it, but I've certainly had fun so far with my first initial plays. I rate the game 8.5 out of 10. I should mention that I've been playing this game again on BoardGameArena, and I was playing it with Paul, who also rates it 8.5 out of 10. We have both latched onto this one and really enjoy it quite a bit. Now, this other new to me game was one I was very, very excited about. I've had for a long time the base game of Warhammer Underworld's Night Vault, along with about half a dozen of the expansion factions that you can pick up with the game. And I've been working on painting up 2 of the factions for forever now, for at least a couple of years, just haven't been getting to that painting, and I'm almost finished painting 2 factions so I can finally play the physical version of Warhammer Underworld's Night Vault. But in the meantime, I've discovered that Warhammer Underworld's Shadespire, the previous version of Warhammer Underworlds, is available on Steam. So I was immediately excited because I thought, well, at least I can finally play this game and play with some other factions that I don't have, so I don't have to necessarily spoil the physical version of the game I have, because the Shadespire factions are all a little bit different. So I immediately purchased it on Steam, downloaded it, was very, very excited to play this game, which I had anticipated as becoming one of my favorite games of all time. And unfortunately, my computer, which is a 2012 Microsoft Surface Pro 1, the original Surface Pro, just couldn't handle the game. And look, I'm such an idiot when it comes to computers that in the past I actually tried to purchase and play The Witcher 3 on my 11-year-old Microsoft Surface Pro computer. And of course that didn't work at all. But I thought that since this was a digital version of a board game, I thought, surely my computer can handle this, but it really couldn't, even after I deleted a whole bunch of stuff off of my computer. I managed to get through a few plays, but it was the type of thing where I would click on something, wait a full 5 to 10 seconds, and then it would go and activate it. So I managed to hold my patience together enough to get through a couple of games played, enough to know that is definitely one that I enjoy. The gameplay is very reliant on dice rolls, so there is that aspect of it, although you do have to maneuver your characters to good positions too, so I do wonder how much depth is in the gameplay. However, I've also known that a large part of the enjoyment for the game, for me, will be the fact that you actually have to pre-build decks to drive the action in your little team of characters that you've selected to play the game with. So every individual warband has its own deck of action cards and goals that you can put together and use to activate that faction. And so I knew that I would really enjoy that aspect of the game, and I was hoping with Shadespire here that I'd be able to do that on the computer, that I'd be able to build some decks in Shadespire and try them out and see how they go. Like I said though, it just didn't really work out for me. It did get me down this whole YouTube rabbit hole of building gaming PCs, and I'm like, you know, if I ever have money again someday, that's probably the first thing I'm going to do, is see if I can build my own PC. But anyways, my initial rating I've given this game is 8.5 out of 10, and although that's a very high rating, it's still not as high as I was expecting it would be, and that's partly because I didn't get to enjoy the experience of building decks, and it was just my initial playing of the game and just kind of chucking dice and seeing what happens. It does push me all the more, though, to get my painting finished up and get Underworlds to the tabletop and finally get that played to see what I think of the full game in all its painted minis glory. So one of these days. There's another goal for 2024, I suppose. And these last two are old favorites that I've talked about in plenty of previous months, so let's just go through them quickly. I had King Domino Origins to the table again. Paul squeaked out a narrow victory here too by only 5 points. But what was cool is we both completed our 7x7 grid of domino tiles, which I don't tend to do very often. I tend to somehow mess up the domino tile build so that I end up with a couple of blank spots in my grid, but this time both of us completed them, and so that was kind of satisfying. I rate this game 9 out of 10, as does Paul. And then my best of the month is Planet Unknown, the polyomino tile layer with a lot of other interesting stuff going on. Paul once again, squeaked out a narrow victory of just 4 points, though that still wasn't quite as close as our previous game in which he won by a single point. So I keep getting just that close, but not quite. At this point, both of us have almost played through all of the corporations and all of the planets that came in the base game. I think with one more play of the game, I think we'll both have had a chance to experience all of both. And so I'm looking forward to the expansion stuff coming out early next year. Like I mentioned in a previous month, I had pledged on GameFound for the expansion content. So that'll add some fun new stuff for us to keep playing this game that we both enjoy a lot. I rate it 9 out of 10. Paul rates Planet Unknown a perfect 10 out of 10. And that was my month of November. What games have you been playing lately? I would love to hear what you've been enjoying. This being the Christmas season, by the time I get this out, it'll be after Christmas. So did you end up with any games under the Christmas tree? Anything new arrive in your collection? Please do tell me all about it. I'd be very eager to hear about it. And I just really appreciate you being with me today, and hope you all have had lovely holidays with your loved ones. Cheers. Hey, Wyatt. I just need to record a video quickly, so could you just be quiet for a little while, please? Thanks. I am recording this on the 24th of December. It didn't really seem all that much. The theme is kind of fun. I always am drawn to Civ. Like I said, I do enjoy Civ games, but I'm tend to drawn. Like I said, credit is Planet Unknown.